New Zealand First is very happy to support this bill, and we commend it to the House.
Nikki Kay.
Mr Speaker, I'm very pleased to be speaking at the third reading of the Exclusive Economic Zone and Continental Shelf Environmental Effects Bill. I'm very pleased because I think that this bill is an example whereby not only have members of the Select Committee worked very hard, but we've also seen both changes throughout the Select Committee process, and we've seen changes that have come from the Minister that I think are going to ensure that we get good environmental protection in the exclusive economic zone, but also that we're able to look at those economic opportunities and lift the standard of living for New Zealanders. I want to just cover off a couple of things from an overall perspective as to how this fits into National's environmental reform package. If we look at what we've done in terms of the Resource Management Act reform, we've passed over 150 amendments of the RMA in our first phase. That is the biggest reform since 1991. The purpose of those amendments were to reduce delays, uncertainties and costs, improve plan development and resource consent processes, strengthen compliance by providing a wider range of enforcement provisions, and we've actually seen some real progress there. So in my electorate in Auckland Central, I have had many constituents who have actually physically come to me and said, look, we think you have got the balance right, we think we are getting quicker decisions, and we think we're getting them at a reduced cost. If we look at the issues around for instance, fresh water, we've invested significantly in cleaning up some of our most polluted rivers, but also in the area, and I come to the area of oceans reform, we have progressed 9 marine reserves. We've announced 9 marine reserves. That will increase the area of marine reserves in New Zealand by 36%. But the area that I think everyone is aware of and has been aware for a long period of time, where there has been a gap, has been further reform in terms of our oceans. And that's what this bill is about. This bill is about ensuring that we address that regulatory gap that currently exists managing in terms of our environmental effects of offshore activities. And I think the point has been made by a number of speakers that currently there is a gap, and I believe there were 46 wells between 1998 that have been drilled without having an effective management regime. So what this bill does, it provides a strong framework focused on 4 things: to assess and manage adverse environmental effects in our oceans, also to provide greater certainty to investors in existing interests. And if you listened to the Honourable Nick Smith's speech, I think he talked very eloquently about the issue of rights of appeal and what that would actually do in terms of the process and add time and delays in terms of the process. It also does meet our New Zealand's international obligations. There's been a huge debate in terms of that at Select Committee throughout these, obviously the speeches in the House as well. We're confident, we've had a range of advice on that it does meet New Zealand's obligations. But I think what's also been important is there was some criticism after the Select Committee process, and we've seen the Minister move via an SOP to significantly improve the legislation, and I want to touch on those issues. And I do acknowledge that there have been a number of organisations, including as well the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, who have commented on these areas. And I just want to touch on those key areas now. So there was a concern by some members around the purpose definition. We have moved and changed the purpose definition to focus on sustainable management. That brings it in line with the RMA. There was significant concern from some members in terms of penalties. We have also moved to increase the maximum penalty from $600,000 to $10 million. I think that sends a very strong message regarding how New Zealand values our oceans. We've clarified the transition period. We've also provided a statutory time frame of about 6 months for marine consent processes. So from my perspective, and we saw as well the Parliamentary Commissioner coming out very clearly to say that she supports this bill and that she wants it passed, that we have made significant improvements, not just through the Select Committee process, but also post the Select Committee process, where I feel that we are in a position with this legislation, and I acknowledge the support of some parties in this House, I believe New Zealand First and the Māori Party, way to say not only is the definition focused on sustainable management, which is more in line with the RMA, not only have we sent some very clear messages around penalties, but we've also clarified things like transitional provisions. And when you actually look at some of those enforcement provisions, particularly around powers of enforcement officers, I think we have got that balance right. And that's why it has been personally a little bit disappointing that Labour and the Greens couldn't support this bill, because we know that currently there is no environmental protection regime. But also the final couple of points that I'd make is that we do have a strong obligation in this country to have sound environmental policies. And with the largest exclusive economic zone in the world, this legislation is incredibly important for our country. And from my perspective, I think too often, sometimes our environmental debates are at the extremes. You have those people who are absolutely focused on the economy. You have other people who may be very emotional from an environmental perspective. And if we look to the future, I do believe in the Blue-Greens principles in terms of having a very scientific and evidence-based approach, but also having an approach that is about good risk management. And I think the SOP that was tabled by the Minister has significantly improved this legislation, as has the Select Committee process. So I'm very pleased to be supporting this legislation to the House. This is part of what needs to be significant reform in terms of our oceans. I'm very pleased to support this bill to the House.
The Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Mr. Speaker.